It's so nice to see all you guys. Um, I just wanted to thank Elizabeth and all the crew for just a wonderful festival, and to thank all of you. We were just talking about how festivals at their best just invigorate you, add to your life, even though you may be tired at this point. You've all been so generous, and it feels like community, and that's not an easy thing to do on video, on YouTube, on Zoom. So appreciate you all. This talk is going to be on music of place, which I'm known for doing. Subtext is balance, improvisation, and the vernacular. And the way the way I've chosen to go about this is to take a big piece of mine that was commissioned by Continental Harmony, the Composers Forum, and the Knight Foundation when they were doing that sort of thing for a group in Southwest Kansas. And I chose a piece that was really not particularly successful because when I talk to the participants, I'm reluctant to criticize anything that you're doing. I'm just so happy that you're doing it. But I have some ideas, and I love to criticize. I love to criticize myself. So I'm going to take this piece. It's called "Head First into the Blue Fields of Grace," and I'm going to chop it up. But first, what I wanted to do was to play something to just relax us a bit. This is going to be a very relaxed session. I don't have any big PowerPoint thing. You can just sit and watch the waveform. So this is a piece. There were a lot of people who mentioned Bach on the, on the various meetings that we had together. And Bach is, of course, one of my favorites. Did this record called Three-Part Invention, in which we took pieces by Bach and we improvised them. We brought in the scores, and then we kind of looked at them and said, well, let's see, what do we do? And usually somebody started something out and we did it. So it was Tracy Silverman on 5-string violin. He usually plays electric 5-string violin, and Tracy is in Nashville. He teaches at Belmont, and he tours a lot with his own concertos. John Adams wrote a concerto for him for the opening of the Disney Hall in LA. And that piece was called The Dharma at Big Sur. And Tracy basically gave John a bunch of electric violin techniques that John then formed into a composition. So Tracy's on this, as is Eugene Friesen, who is a marvelously inventive cellist who's invented all kinds of stuff. One of his inventions is called Afro pits. And it's kind of been taken into the lexicon of cello, contemporary cello. So Eugene Friesen, cello, Tracy Silverman, 5-string violin, and I'm on piano. This is reimagined Bach.
So, Phil, I think you might have to share the sound.
Phil, I think we're hearing it through your microphone and not through Zoom.
Yeah, I think you'll have to check a little box somewhere about sharing computer sound.
Oh, okay. We're not hearing that? Sorry.
We could hear it, but it was very, very faint.
Okay. Well, let me see. Of course, this all worked an hour ago. So do I have to say the advanced sharing option, only host? Am I a co-host now? Sorry.
Yes, you are a co-host.
Okay.
When you click share screen, do you see a little button on the bottom left corner of the pop-up that says share screen?
Oh, look at that. It was on there before. So very sorry.
No worries.
It was really pretty though. Put it back on. Okay. Where'd it go? Sorry, guys. I swore I would not do this.
Not a problem. Not a problem. It
Be
happens.
right with you.
Yep. The joys of Zoom. It's
Okay. Disappeared again. Weird. Okay. Okay, maybe somebody let me know if you can hear this.
Yep, we can hear.
Great. Yeah. So Tracy Silverman on five-string violin, Eugene Friesen on cello, and me on piano. Wouldn't you like to write for those guys? So this is the start of the idea of the vernacular. Now, both of those guys can play anything. I can play almost anything, but we have really seriously studied the different world traditions. Both of those men are heavily indoctrinated in Brazilian music, and Tracy's just a monster rock and roll electric violin player, and I've done a lot of different stuff. So composers these days are writing a lot for what I call the vernacular, which means there's all those little bends and stuff that people do automatically, but that take years of study, much like the ornamentation in Bach. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about that and show you how I put that into this piece that was an abject failure. So, I've never had a composition teacher. I went to Harvard, and I did study chamber music with Leon Kirshner, and I studied counterpoint with David Del Tredici, both of whom wonderful composers and won Pulitzer Prizes. The first piece I heard when I got to Harvard was Kirshner's String Quartet number 3, which was written for electronics and string quartet, and it was performed in Sanders Theater, this beautiful old wood theater, with speakers at each corner. And I sat right dead center. I really didn't know what I was getting into. I sat dead center so that the electronic sounds crossed right through my head, and I just fell over. And then I went up to Kirshner and told him how much I loved the piece, and he kind of took me under his wing and gave me a tour of this was before school had started, gave me a tour of the music building, and we went through every place and went up to the top floor where there was a room full of electronic equipment. I think it was a bunch of Moog modules in the day. And I said, that's what I want to do. And he kind of said, yeah, first you have to take music 5-1, then you have to take music 1-5-1, then you have to take, counterpoint and harmony, all these different things. And I said, so this is just for graduate students? And he said, yep. So not to be detoured, I looked all over the place in Boston for an electronic music course. And in the back of a weekly arts paper was a little tiny ad by Robert Seeley, brilliant composer and just a wonderful, generous human being who was at the New England Conservatory teaching composition and electronic music. And for $40, you could come to his house, I think it was like for a month, 2 days a week, and spend 3 hours. This was for $40. And he had an entire room full of Moog modules, and he let us mess with those. He taught us the whole lexicon of electronic music, which has really served me well. Like the next piece that I'm doing is commissioned by the Blackfoot Pathways, which is a sculpture park in Montana, in Lincoln, Montana, 26-acre sculpture park, and they commissioned me to write, I guess it's called a walk piece. Although I will perform it live. It won't be just recorded sound. I don't think I want to do any recorded sound actually, but I decided that in all of the source material for that would be analog electronic sounds that are unrecognizable to most people as they walk through this beautiful place with the gigantic sculptures from really great sculptors from all over the world. So I think, we were talking about that. Some people say, well, I always wanted to have a Moog, they would say. But there's kind of a renaissance of all the analog stuff. Some of it's hideously expensive. Some of it is really cheap. And I think that the idea is that you learn electronic music transfers so well to your concept of acoustic sounds, your concept of composing. I know that all of us who have done that and then transfer that stuff over to the analog and to the acoustic world have learned a lot of it. So, at Harvard, I didn't study composition. I studied a bunch of stuff. I studied piano at New England Conservatory. And when I finished, one of my advisors said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. Maybe graduate school? He said, nah, not for you. He was right. He was absolutely right for me. So, I went to the Marlborough Chamber Music Festival, which was a real high-end chamber music festival, and I had a very high opinion of myself, and I thought, I'm so good. Somebody's going to come along and say, hey, this is what you should do. Didn't happen. Good things come to those who wait. Good things come to those that go out and get it. Is what I think. So I stayed around in the Boston area, and I played in rock and roll and bluegrass bands, and I was determined to learn contemporary music that I didn't even get to study at Harvard. There was so much other stuff to do, even though I went to countless new music concerts and jazz concerts and almost failed out because I was always at a concert. So what I did was play with these bands. I worked in a printing press, and I lived close to Concord, Massachusetts, which has a monstrous new music library full of recordings of new music and books about new music. And I poured through every single one of them. And that served me well. That was the start of my graduate education. And, we talked a lot about community in the last couple of days and how it's so important keeping track of your compadres and going on and just keeping in touch with them and reaching out to them and talking to them. And I can honestly say that I never got a job because of Harvard. No, never got a job because of the degree that I got. Every piece of work that I got was because of people that I knew. Once I started touring rock and roll, it was from those people. Once I started touring solo piano, it was from those people. So this is kind of leading to this piece. So I moved to the East Bay, San Francisco Bay area. My wife was going to Mills College, which also was a center for new music, and continued that study, going to all kinds of concerts there. But in order to make a living, I had to do a lot of different things that some of them were interesting, some of them were not interesting. One that was really interesting was I taught for the East Bay Center for the Arts. And this was a new development that had happened. The East Bay is, Berkeley, Oakland, Richmond, San Pablo, that whole area, Hayward. And they had started a new center whose main goal was to reach out to small schools that didn't have a lot of things going on for them. And so I started teaching with them, and we would go into these schools, and a lot of times it was an upright piano that was in the hallway, but the kids were ready to learn, and they just ate it up. But the really cool thing about that was community, because there were a lot of people like me who were not in academia or had finished academia and were trying to get into other things. And it was there that I met Paul Drescher, who's a wonderful guitarist. I happened to be hanging around in the lounge at the center, and he was talking about Jimi Hendrix. And who's this guy? Big, tall, academic-looking guy at the time. And so we started talking. He invited me to his place to jam. And we started playing all this music. And eventually that led to me premiering his piano piece called The Same Temple, which is a beautiful piece, duet. I premiered it with Ray Imamura. And went on and played in his, at the time it was called the Electroacoustic Band, so the Paul Drescher Ensemble. And a lot of the reason for that was to play Paul's pieces, which were just phenomenal, but we also commissioned scores from other composers. Over the years, we played scores by John Adams, John Luther Adams, Alvin Curran, Mark Applebaum, and a lot of other people, and some classics from people like Lou Harrison and Roger Reynolds. And Adams asked us to play his opera. I was looking at the ceiling, and then I saw the sky. Some of us were improvisers. And that opera was about the Third Strike Law. It was set during the time of the hideous Loma Prieta earthquake that killed a lot of people and destroyed a lot of buildings in California. He wanted improvisers, and then he would, we would come in and we would do stuff to some scenes. He had some things written out. He would record everything. Very fast worker. And then he'd go back home and listen to the tapes that we'd done, and he'd rewrite everything. Sometimes he would use ideas that we had. Sometimes he would write pieces specifically for how we played. So that really was my graduate school. So, you know, in these so-called lessons that we've had, I really feel like I can't tell people how to be a composer or what to do and how to get there, because everybody has a different path. You know, Sun Ra, who's a great legendary jazz player and composer and thinker, you got to look up Sun Ra if you never have. There's a great documentary about him, but he said, somebody was talking about how you learn, and he listened. He said, you listen to everything. He said, but that's history. What's your story? You know, I think such a great cliche. I just love that. But there is, you know, when I was at Cambridge, Karl-Heinz Stockhausen came through, and let's see, you might have to move the thing on the side to see this. So one of his great pieces, my favorites, is a piece called Hymnen, and it's an electronic piece based on sounds from radios from around the world, and also the national anthems of a lot of different countries. Just a beautiful, amazing piece. And in that, it's an LP. I think that's the only way you can get it. In that, he had these directions on composing. Hide what you compose in what you hear. Cover what you hear. Place something next to what you hear. Place something far away from what you hear. Support what you hear. Continue for a long time an event you hear. Transform an event until it becomes unrecognizable. Transform an event you hear into the one you composed last. Compose what you expect to come next. Compose often, but also listen for long periods to what is already composed without composing. Mix all these instructions. Increasingly accelerate the current of your intuition. And it's that last suggestion that's been most important to me, because I've always improvised, and it wasn't until, you know, a little ways into my life as a composer when I started to really trust myself. I think part of it is that the more you do, the better you get, or the faster you get anyway. You may not get better, but you get faster for sure. Speaking about myself, but I really started trusting my improvisational skills, which was my intuition. You know, great improvisers, you have no idea how they manage to hit all those things together and how they manage to do all those incredible things together. So accelerate the current of your intuition really spoke to me. So the improvisation that I did kind of led a lot to the exploration of the vernacular, I call it, of rock and roll, blues and jazz and folk music, which I do not look upon as a lesser kind of music at all. For some reason, I was lucky growing up in a little town. Nobody told me one kind of music was better than another. So I'm just completely innocent of the differences between music. I think I'm weird. I think I can listen to an old-timey banjo player just as quick as I can listen to Stockhausen. It doesn't matter to me. It's just all music, and it all has to do with life, and it all has to do with connection. So here's a couple of little short excerpts from my vernacular career. First one is band I played with. First band I played with in San Francisco area. Let me know if this. Let me know if this comes through. I'll just start it and then I'll stop it. Okay, great. All right, so this band is Perry and the Pumpers, and we played in a little club in North Beach in San Francisco for a little while, and it was, you know, I have one of the band members gave me a list of how much money we made, and it's pretty much what I remembered. I think the most we made was $28 a piece. But it was so much fun, and it was such an education that I stuck with it until I got picked up by Elvin Bishop, who is on this record. This is just a little short thing. I'm playing piano, and Perry Welsh, Perry of Perry and the Pumpers, is singing, and Elvin Bishop comes in towards the end. Just a little chunk here.
If I can't find a bird, I'm gonna jump overboard and drown.
Oops.
Oh.
All right. So the next is an example from a band I was in called Newgrange. That was more recent. Bunch of bluegrass virtuosi. Allison Brown on banjo, who wrote this piece called Leaving Cottondale, and Daryl Anger on fiddle, Mike Marshall on mandolin, Tim O'Brien. Tim O'Brien, I think Mike's playing guitar on this one. Tim O'Brien played mandolin or mandocello and sang the Bing Crosby of bluegrass, I think is what people call him. And I'm playing piano. They let me play. And in this band, we couldn't stay together too long because everybody had solo careers, but it was really a blast to play with these guys because they could play anything too. Piano players, it's not a typical bluegrass instrument, but I think the advantage that I had was that I knew that I couldn't play all 10 fingers at the same time or I'd get kicked out of the band. Piano players tend to want to do that. So if you're ever orchestrating for bluegrass and you want to use a piano, listen to what the other guys are doing. They're playing, a lot of times they're playing single notes. So that's what I did too. So this is Leaving Cottondale. And Allison kicked us off at a tempo that just about killed me. That was from a live concert. I forget where it was. We recorded everything that we did. Someday we'll put all that stuff out. So, you're probably wondering, what has all this stuff got to do with new music? Or maybe you're not wondering about that. Roberto had a whole list of wonderful ideas about how to compose. And his website's also wonderful. And I went to the website and found it just as fascinating as his talk was. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. But one thing that I came to was a list. And he said, what you will find it's good to self-analyze yourself, what you will find in my music. And that was great. He really knows what it is that he does. And then he had a list as what you will not find in my music. So I started thinking about that, and I thought, that's probably an analysis, his own analysis of his music after the fact. He said, well, these things are not there. And I thought, well, as composers, do we tell ourselves, I'm not going to include this, or I'm not going to include that, or that's not new music, or this is new music, or what is new music? And I've said it before, Pablo Casal's had this saying that there's nothing new under the sun, but there has never been anybody in the history of the universe like you. And there will never be anybody like you. So you might as well write you, is what I figure. So this next piece, the piece that I'm going to talk about is the abject failure. I'll get to that. I'm kind of a little shying away from it, but I'll get to it. Somebody once said there are no wrong notes, in the festival, and that could be true. Definitely are wrong ideas, though, that don't work, or unsuccessful ideas. So for a lot of my pieces, I've been known about writing music about place, and that's how I get to a lot of these commissions. People will call me up and they say, we'd like Canandaigua, New York, for example. They wanted me to come and write a piece about Canandaigua. So normally what my process is to go there on a residency, and some notes are more right than others. Yeah. Animal Farm, Piano Farm. So I've been known to write music about place, and people say, well, okay, what's that? How do you do that? So normally I'll get a residency in a place. I love going into communities, and I will sometimes I'll get to spend a year there. Sometimes it's shorter. It's better if I get to spend a year. I'll work in the schools, I'll work with the musicians. Generally what I start with is reading the poets of the area, because they are able to distill what it is about a place much better than anybody can do. And so that's my usual place. Like in Kansas too, there was a bluegrass festival. I took part in that. There was another festival. I took part in that. I study the archaeological and human history, experience any local realities. Basically, I try and forget myself. And a lot of time there's not much time to do that. So I really have to open up to the community. I do love doing this. I mean, I look at Charles and I say, Charles Nichols. I say, what an unbelievable situation that is. And it is true, but not all of us can get that situation. So I've kind of specialized in this thing, which means I don't specialize in anything other than traveling around and staying in places. So how do you write a piece that's, you say it's about Kansas, but you're from Passaic, New Jersey, and everything you write sounds like Passaic, New Jersey? I mean, how do you do that? So I find myself looking at the flora and fauna. I find myself looking at the density of the woods. I find myself listening to what the sound really is, seeing what it is that changes that sound. Montana, where Charles spent some time too, is really kind of amazing in terms of the quality of sound throughout the state. There are not many people here. So there are places you can go and you don't hear anything. There are very few places like that. I spent a lot of time recording natural sound, pretty much through the Southwest and up through Montana, with a guy named Bernie Krause, who records his deal is to collect the vanishing natural sounds. And there really aren't many places where, we put our microphones out in the morning and in the evening. There really aren't many places where you aren't going to hear a tractor or an airplane. There are a few, and then it's usually only for a couple of minutes. So it really is a vanishing soundscape. Africa is much better that way. So when I got ready to write this piece, I chose to write, it was a 30-minute chamber piece that I finally got around to. And the players, I decided to write it for string quartet, double bass, woodwind quintet, and improvising trio. So you heard Eugene Friesen in that first Bach piece. I haven't really shown you his amazing inventiveness, but beautiful tone. And this next piece is Daryl Anger. We heard Daryl a little bit, not really playing a solo in that bluegrass piece, but he was in that band. So here's another example of musica place. Daryl and I had a duet for years, and we did a tour of Montana, which is where I'm from, with the express goal of trying to find Métis musicians. Now, if you don't know the Métis tradition, it's basically people who came from Canada down into the United States, kind of a mixed combination of Métis means half, maybe half blood. They also call themselves Michif or Metis. The Red River area in Canada is largely where they have settled, but it was kind of a combination of French and Cree Indians originally, and has come to mean any mixed blood peoples. There's a beautiful book about that by a friend of mine that we just lost, Nicholas Roman. It's called We Were All Under One Robe, which is, the more you find out about the world, the more you realize, yes, we are. My DNA is I truly am related to everybody, it seems like, from my DNA. So this tradition is a beautiful tradition in that, you have the Quebecois kind of jig and fiddle tradition combined with some Scotch-Irish fiddle stuff. And then the style of jigging is basically they levitate. I've never seen anything like it in my life. The great dancers are pretty much off. You have no idea how they do that. And the music itself contributes to that sense of lightness. They used to have these things they called bush dances, and they would go out in the middle, somebody's house out in the middle of nowhere in Manitoba, or Saskatchewan, and they would literally throw all the furniture out in the snow, have a fire, and go in and dance, and they could dance for hours. And I experienced a little bit of that. I went up to Turtle Mountain Reservation with Nicholas and played with a bunch of Métis fiddlers, a bass player. I played keyboards, and so I knew a bunch of these tunes that they knew. I mean, we were playing the Red River Jig, which has 15 beats. It's not a square dance, and they form a circle and they would start dancing. And I think we played that song for an hour and a half because nobody wanted to quit. You hit that groove, and it was just phenomenal. It was phenomenal. So I think, one thing that's very American and it's very much of the vernacular is dance, is rhythmic dance. I see no reason to avoid it. I'm an American. I'm going to use those beats. But we wanted to do an homage to Métis music. So we did this piece on a record that we did called Cross Time, Daryl Anger and I, and the piece was called Le Chemin Riel. Louis Riel was a leader whose life is also worth looking up. He wanted to, it's a typical English Canadians against the French and Indians. And so just some real tragedy happened up there. And Louis Riel was a charismatic leader who wanted to bring them out of that and went to hiding in Montana. And then they sort of tricked him into coming back up to Canada, and they hung him. The myth about Louis Riel is that while he was on the gallows, he said, "My people will rise in 100 years, and they will do it through the music." So we took that, and it was about 100 years after. So we, the culture is going strong in Canada. There's a group in Montana outside of Great Falls, the Little Shell Band, who have just achieved federal recognition. So things are changing, but the Métis have kind of spread out everywhere and influenced a lot of different things. Lewis and Clark, if you had a French name on the Lewis and Clark expedition, you were Métis. So this is a piece, just a little chunk of a piece, actually. Well, it's a fairly long chunk of a piece. Where is it? Sorry. I have to open it. Huh. Shoot, I really want to play this for you. All right. Excuse me, I'm very sorry. All right, let's see if I can find this. Okay, so this is a piece called the Ugpick Waltz, and I wanted to show you the transition into this. This was written by a Métis in British Columbia. It's become a standard, just a straight-ahead, beautiful waltz. Ugpick is an owl with big eyes. We'll jump a little bit ahead. So one of the traditions in Métis fiddling, when they would get into these bush dances, sometimes there would only be one fiddler. Usually there'd be two. But if the one guy didn't show up for some reason, then the other one fiddler would have one fiddle, and he could take anybody from the group who was at the party at the bush dance, and they would do this thing they call bucking. So all they would do is just dampen the strings, and the person who didn't play the fiddle would just go with the sort of a drum-like thing. The Métis culture was not a drum culture for the most part, but that idea of bucking was something that kept rhythm. Then the other thing that they would do, if there were two fiddlers, they would do this thing called ghosting that they even do today. And sometimes they didn't know what the tune was. Sometimes the other fiddler knew the tune by another name, so they would get right next to each other before. And you see jazz guys do this too. They'll like, okay, we'll do this. So they would play this thing really quietly. So we use those two things in the piece. And then we go into Daryl starts playing the Red River Jig, which has 15 beats, and I start doing a bunch of other stuff. This piece was almost entirely an improvisation. We knew where we were going, and we knew what tunes we were going to do. But other than that, just the fact that we had played together so much was what made us able to actually make a piece of music out of it. So yeah, is that new music? I don't know. There's certainly a lot of new music ideas in there. And how we hit those sections together is just because we knew each other. We didn't plan anything out except that we were going to play the tune. And it just developed by our knowledge of the history and our knowledge of playing together and our knowledge of the Metis music. Daryl and I both studied with a fiddler from Turtle Mountain named Jimmy LaRock, who passed away recently. So when I got around to doing this piece for Kansas, I know that when you go into a residency situation, you can't always choose who you're going to get to perform your piece. Sometimes you do. Sometimes you have to go with community groups. And I think that, they're not going to be able to play fast stuff or extended techniques. Maybe some of them can, some of them don't count that great. So you got to kind of write your piece. And I don't mind writing my pieces for groups that aren't, specializing in new music. I don't mind that at all. I feel that sometimes amateur groups really, you get better performances because everybody's putting everything that they have into them. It's the same way that Beethoven would write really difficult piano parts with fingering that people would normally use. Other fingering would have made it easier, but he wanted to feel the effort in the pieces, the transcendence in the music. So sometimes I think that's really good. But for this one, I wanted to bring my friends along because I knew what they could do. So I brought Daryl and I brought Eugene Friesen on cello. So when I got to Kansas, I spent, I think it was a year residency, and there was, a small group, Southwestern Kansas. It was the Southwest Kansas Arts Council, and there's always some saint, involved with these groups who just does everything and manages to get things going. And that was Connie Bonfi, who got the Kansas Governor's Award for the Arts. And she was down there, but there were a lot of groups that were just like, there was so much squabbling and scrabbling and infighting. It was just difficult. I didn't know who was going to play my piece until really late in the residency because the local orchestra was fighting with it was horrible. I couldn't concentrate on composing because I was in the community and I was part of that. And as much as I tried, I think I successfully kept myself away from picking sides, even though all the sides wanted me to be on. They worked me over. so it was, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes it can be real tough residency. And environmentally, there had been an ice storm that knocked down half the trees, in the town and in the county. And so it was an edgy place. So I was reading poetry and I came across this poem by a guy who was the Poet Laureate of Kansas for a while. And this is by Harley Elliott. It's called Waking in Some Good Person's Yard. And I named the piece Headfirst into the Blue Fields of Grace. Stupid thing. I don't want to learn more. Thank you. And I met Harley and told him this, and all he said was, wow. So waking in some good person's yard, the southern train passes its horn a long bruise on the landscape. Just at dawn, here I am, uncurling, and the forsythia bush is blown open during the night. A foolish man, awake in the doorway of spring. The beautiful sorrow of all life circles me. The wind blows and blows. I fall headfirst into the blue fields of grace. Yeah, so that poem just quieted me down and made me able to get on with this piece. So I had all kinds of ideas. The first thing that happened was when I was getting nowhere. I was staying on a ranch, and I took a long walk on the ranch out in the prairie, and there's a lot of tall grass prairie in Kansas, but this was short grass prairie. I was walking, and it was beautiful, although hot day, not a cloud in the sky, dry, and I had some water with me and the notebook that I always carry. So there was a kind of a tunnel thing built of stone. It was about 100 years old, and I guess the sheep herder that had been there, these places are kind of all over that area, and they were for shelter from the storm. So I went in there to get cool for a few minutes, and still nothing came to me. So I came out, and I was walking along, kind of not paying attention to anything, and out of the clear blue sky, a big bird flew down and knocked my hat off. I said, oh, okay. So this piece is about disruption. And Kansas, in a lot of ways, is about disruption. There are cyclones there, and there are these snowstorms. And politically, there were, when the white settlers came in, they displaced a lot of people who were already there. The Cherokee Trail Cherokee Strip, all that stuff is down there on the southern edge of Kansas. So I thought, okay, well, I've got one of the themes, but the other theme was the idea of going headfirst into the blue fields of grace. And for me, that happens a lot in a piece. I like to write melodies. I like to write really naive, simple melodies. And I don't write whole pieces with that. I put a lot of other stuff in them. But I've come to think that I should put a little simple, goofy melody that doesn't go anywhere. So that's what I did with this one. Now, I talked a lot about balance to people. And we also talked about with some of the people that I was working in lessons with. We talked about how do you analyze your own pieces, and it seems like you have to get some distance from them. Like when I wrote this piece, I thought it was just wonderful. I thought it was working really well, and I had Daryl and Eugene to back me up on this, and we had players from the Wichita Symphony. But as usual, you're not going to get all the players that you want. And one of the players in here was someone whose family had given a lot of money to the Arts Council, and she was in one of the warring groups. So I said, sure, yeah, come play. And you can hear that. I mean, she tried valiantly, and I thought I wrote a pretty easy part, but didn't quite turn out. So when I went to analyze my piece, my head first analysis was, okay, about the balance. Some sections are too long. It's a 30-minute piece. Some sections are misconceived. I introduced what I was considering the three entities, the string quartet and the bass, the woodwind quintet, and the improvising trio. I kind of introduced them separately. Okay, that could have been one piece. That went on for a really long time. But I just, it just it sounded good. But when I got the whole thing together, it was out of balance. And one of the reasons that it was out of balance was I decided that the three improvising players should each have a cadenza. Holy cow, what a mistake that was. The better thing to do would have been to say, okay, we're going to have an improvised cadenza where the three of us improvise. But I wrote, an in for Daryl, the fiddler, and an out for him. I wrote an in for Eugene and an out. And I wrote an in and an out for my improvisation so that everybody knew when to come in, and we had signals that would do that. Thinking everybody would have that enough in their head that they'd be able to blend that into stuff. So I wanted disruption to be in there. I didn't quite want it to be as disrupted as it turned out to be, and I wanted it to be a little more dramatic, but it turned out to be really long. Then I had this idea that I was going to teach the players the vernacular stuff, because Daryl is really expert at that, as going in and having residencies with orchestras and teaching them how to fiddle. I thought, okay, well, we only got a couple days to do this. So Daryl, in his cadenza, the start of his cadenza, was going to stand up in front of the string players and teach them how to do a couple things. And one of the things that he taught them how to do is a thing called the chop, where you dampen the strings and play this chop thing, which is very percussive. Daryl claims to have invented it, and Tracy Silverman claims to have invented it. They were both in Turtle Island String Quartet, so maybe they invented it at the same time, and maybe somebody else invented it. But in any case, it's taken, it's become part of the language too of contemporary music, the chop. I mean, there are orchestras all over the United States that Tracy and Daryl have taught to do the chop. So he's going to teach the Wichita Symphony players to do the chop. And I thought it'd be really cool if he did that. And then we go into his cadenza by him playing fragments of sort of Carnatic bluegrass. I mean, the scale is not a bluegrass scale, but the fiddling is bluegrass fiddle. And Daryl does all these, just remarkable little inflections that are just add so much juice to everything and so much life to everything. And I wanted to have the fiddlers try, the string section try and do that. So that worked okay. Not great. It took, there's nervous laughter by the audience. And this took place in a barn, chamber music at the barn, which was kind of a good place for some things. Maybe it's a good place for Schubert songs and Mozart octets or something. We made so much noise in there that it was quite amazing. So what the things that I learned about this were balance, that not all of my ideas are great, even though they seem great, and that some of them are great, but they're ill-conceived, and they're not, the timing is not right. And the other thing that I learned is that you can't expect orchestra players to improvise very much. You just have to, even though you give them room and you give them ideas and stuff, they will a lot of times just freeze up on you. The only improvising that the fiddle players had to do was with Daryl. He would play them a phrase. It's the method that people learn bluegrass by. You sit around in a circle, you play, okay, then everybody goes da 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 da. Then you learn the whole piece that way. So Daryl was going to teach them all these little things, and it was supposed to be funny. And I thought it was pretty funny, but it wasn't really that funny. Daryl had a good time. So there was that. And then at the end, I had the idea of the Haydn surprise symphony where everybody, I think it was a surprise symphony, everybody walks out at the end and there's one player left, and pretty soon there's nobody left. I thought that would be a beautiful thing. And we would leave, in this case, it was the viola player who was kind of the leader of the group. She would be there and she would be playing this little naive tune. The problem was she forgot the tune. I should have written the tune out, a whole tune for her. She played like half the tune, and half the tune is not much. But people were very nice, And then later on, I was asked to do it for a symphony, and I thought, okay, this will be better. It was so much worse. All right. So I'm going to play a little bit of this. Let's see, how's our time? So the first chunk of the piece was where I introduced all the elements. And first was, I thought I was being really nice to give everybody a solo. And I was, but it was way too long, but it's kind of pretty. So I'll play that. So another problem with that is that I should have conducted it. Once the French horn player came in there, the tempo went down to like 2/3 of what I wanted it to be. So that made the piece even longer. At this point, it was 3 minutes long. So that's too much because we haven't even hit the little cute little melody yet. So we went on to the cute little melody. Already, I was feeling like, this is going to take forever. So the cute little melody comes in with the trio. And that was fine. Eugene, for some reason, was feeling very melancholy. So he just kind of got a little bit maudlin with the thing where I wanted it to be more naive. So the other thing I learned from that, I learned I should have conducted the piece, or somebody should have conducted it so that it kept the tempo. And when this came in, I should have had a little more direction to Eugene and Daryl. And they all said at the end, they said, yeah, we took too much time for this. And it's true. But aside from that, I could have chopped quite a bit. So here's the little naive melody. Okay, so that's too long. Here come the birds. Here come the disruptive birds. Some counting problems going on in there. Counting problems here. Chance for Eugene to show off a few extended cello techniques. So this is the start of Eugene's solo, which is really cool, but dang, it's long. And, they both got off. We didn't have a stage. We were kind of in the middle of everybody in the barn. They both got off and they said, yep, that was too long. I'm sorry, it's too long. So I'm going to jump, even though there's some really great stuff in there, I know by the time, that was so it was a 4-minute cadenza. By the time we finished that, southbound train. Pretty cool. So, yeah, by this time the piece is 10 minutes long. Got 20 minutes to go. You getting tired? Yeah. So I think there's some of this could have been resolved by faster tempi. Some of it could have been resolved by cutting down the length by me figuring out how to make the cadenzas be shorter, by the three of us playing. Tempi would have changed a lot of stuff, but then I had, I just wanted everybody to get to play the tune. So this is kind of pretty, but then it goes on and we get out of that. And Daryl is about to start his cadenza where he teaches the orchestra players how to be fiddlers. I don't think they like being laughed at. Because they were trying pretty hard. Carnatic bluegrass. There you go. All right, here comes the infamous chop. He's trying to teach him the chop. Oh yeah, still going on. And it's great. It's just like there's a lot of it. So we'll go to the out. Oh, wait a minute. Oh. Another too long section. They decided to slow the whole thing down then. Okay. Pretty, but it's too slow and too long. So then the composer gets his cadence, and he's so riled up that he just plays forever. Okay, you're ticked, aren't you? Jazz from Canada. this so long? Oh, dang it. All right. So okay, I'm gonna skip to the end. You know, such lovely players. And then at the end, I said, play something. And it degenerated into stuff that was not what I wanted. So I realized I had to write that for them. And then when we got to the very end, as the players were leaving, that also didn't work out the way I thought it was going to work out. I told some of them to make bird sounds. She forgot the other part of the tune. But the audience was very nice. So thanks for listening to that, you guys. I forget how long this is. I don't want it. Oh, there it is. Does anybody have any questions? Yeah, the whole piece is, I don't have any, of those. I think chamber music at the barn is an institution in Kansas, and I think that you can still get it from them. There's a couple other pieces. I should have brought that CD. Thanks, Kira. Thanks, Ben. Yeah, I have a chance to do it again with the Cascade String Quartet, who played one of Charles' pieces, and they can really play this. And then the Chinook winds in Great Falls, and I think Trace. I think I can get Tracy and Eugene back to do this stuff. And boy, I'm going to chop the heck out of it, and I'm gonna do some tempies that are a little bit more listenable, so that it isn't a 32-minute piece. I forget how long this session goes, Adam?
We've got about 15 minutes if we need it.
Okay, yeah, we don't have to go to the end. Does somebody have any ideas or any questions or, about anything, about bluegrass, about Kansas, about being a composer of residencies? Anything? About playing in a barn? Oh, the other thing that happened was that right before, like the year before I came to do this thing, my host couple had a barn tossed by a tornado that came right into their bedroom. So Kansas is quite the place, yeah. How does one get a residency, Zach says. Yeah. From my experience, it is every residency that I've gotten has not been through an agency or through a cold call, I think. I'm trying to think if that's true. I think I got one by just calling up somebody and said, hey, I'd like to write a piece about where you are. For the most part, like this one, the Kansas residency came about because Eugene spent a lot of time in Kansas. I think he partly grew up there. So he was playing there. And I went back and played with him a little bit. And then the Paul Winter consort that he was playing in came, and their piano player didn't show up. So I played with them. Stuff like that. And then I met all the people who were there. The Canandaigua residency came about because of my previous solo piano stuff. But I think, we were talking about how resources for composers. And one of the great things to do is to link up with all the arts councils. They're all in a tough spot right now, but there are still things that are open. And, if you hook up with all 50 of them and you check all the monthly emails that they send with composer opportunities, every once in a while there's something that's really cool. And, my experience is if you have some kind of connection with somebody in the state, or if you convince them that you have some kind of connection with somebody or with the state, they're more open. Sometimes it's not necessarily like a contest. Sometimes it's more an invitation to do something if you connect with people. But I think everybody here, it's to me, it's so rewarding. It's really hard work because they keep you going. I mean, in schools, and sometimes the situations are not great. I did start a nonprofit called Arts Without Boundaries to help take care of residency composers and musicians, and that's kind of turned into a local billings thing, which really breaks my heart. But that's what happens when you turn stuff over to a board. So, any questions on how like that residency? Like I think convincing people that you have a connection and that you can do it and that you have an affinity for what it is that they're doing and you can bring something special. I think, kind of a willingness to work in schools is a really big deal. And I actually love doing that. I mean, sometimes the situations are just immensely difficult, but, especially if you're a piano player, I did one residency in Western Montana, and it was really a cool school where the tradition was that everybody from the from the fifth grade on plays an instrument. It's not really a one-room schoolhouse, maybe a three-room schoolhouse. And then they have a building that is the gymnasium and the auditorium and has a stage. And there was a piano in the back of it. And so I was going to give a concert for all the kids, and I pulled I pulled the piano out and I started thumping on the keys, and it was like I can't, so I had take the, right before 5 minutes before the concert, I took the piano apart. There was a mouse nest right over about 3 keys, and I had to just grab it, throw it out, so push the piano to the front of the stage. So, but they loved it, And my favorite part of that whole thing was I didn't know about the tradition of all the kids playing an instrument. And I said, as I always do, so how many of you play an instrument? Raise your hand. The whole school, because it was like 5 through 12, raised their hand. I said, oh, that's pretty good. And then they told me afterwards that, yeah, we have to play an instrument. I think the Kansas residency was, sometimes the amount of the reward is made sweeter by the difficulty. Sorry. And that one was definitely difficult. JC, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. You had mentioned improvising being a large part of your life. I can
Right.
definitely relate. I was wondering if you could speak on more about that trusting in yourself
Oh, yeah.
in the improv realm.
Well, I think it's better now. I think a lot of things are better now for musicians' mental health. But there are still pockets where people discourage you from doing one thing or another. And I think for me, Harvard was really an interesting place to go. I don't regret that I went there at all. But I think that I had some recovering to do after I got out of there. It's 365 years of history that included Walter Piston and, Leonard Bernstein and all these people. And it's like, oh, man, how can I ever? And I think the thing to realize is that you're not them and they are not you. And improvisation, I just always improvised because that's nobody ever stopped me. So the trusting part, the trusting in myself, has only increased over the years, and it's gotten so that even though my sense of balance was really off in this one, the ideas were really cool. There were some really cool ideas, and a lot of those came up through improvisation, and then I worked on them and developed them. I record all my improvisations, and in some way or another, whether it's my phone or a little digital recorder like this thing, or sometimes it's MIDI into a computer. Sometimes it's it's writing stuff on a notebook that I carry around all the time. I've got an even smaller one than this that I carry around all the time. Sometimes those ideas pop up. You're riding in a plane or you're driving along, you pull over, grab those ideas, because they, some of them are really good. Some of them suck, but some of them are really good. And I've let enough really good ones get away thinking I could remember them without writing them down, that now I grab them because they're in the air, and you just you gotta take them when they come. I think you can develop. Development is a whole different thing. The ideas, I don't think you can will yourself to have ideas. It's going to come to you at some point. People. I was talking to. I wish I could remember who it was. One of the composers. We had a lesson, and I said, "So what are you working on?" He told me one of the pieces. And I said, "Do you have some of that to play?" He said, "Nope." He said, "So when I tell that to people that I'm working on something, they assume I have something on paper and I've written it down." And he said, "No, I'm working on it." And that means a lot of times there's stuff you just have to go through a lot. Like with this Kansas piece, I didn't get anything until a bird attacked me. I was like, okay, that's good. But I think for me, the act of improvisation is as much composition as, putting pencil to paper. And I still write all my scores down, except the electronic ones. And I'm kind of glad I don't have to write those down, because those are really strange. Be really tough, play this note of this sample or whatever. No, the composition comes into, making the sample or finding the sound. That's where the composition is. But for me, I know Charles is going to talk about that tomorrow. Or is it today? Tomorrow. Yes. Today? Isn't there an electronic music thing? There's not, huh?
There's a concert tomorrow.
Concert tomorrow. Oh, okay. So, great. So that'll be fun. That'll be great. Yeah, Chase, I don't know if that, do you want to expand on what it is you would like to, hear, or in terms of an answer?
I don't think there should ever really be an answer. Like you've said, you can't really tell people what or what not to do. It's just some ideas. But one of the things I've realized in the last few years, especially with quarantine, I grew up with jazz and pop singer-songwriter stuff, but always loved the contemporary music, but always felt when I improvise, that is doing jazz or pop singer-songwriter things. But I've recently started just improvising and realizing that, that material is pretty interesting. Maybe I should expand on that with more of a written approach, or not even. And it's gotten to some good places, and talking to some people, they have confirmed that improv is definitely a way to go. It's not to be written off.
I was gonna, I don't know if you know about this app, but there's a iPhone app called AnyTune Pro Plus. And it is so helpful for me because a lot of the ideas come when I'm kind of playing out of my mind. You know how that is. You're not playing anything that you've really played before, and you've recorded and you listen to it and you say, what in the world did I do with that? So you're playing it really fast. And so this AnyTune Pro Plus, you can take any recording that you have, except for stuff on iTunes, and you can put it into AnyTune Pro Plus, and it you can, these kind of machines have been around a long time, but it's very handy. Right here, it's right here. You can actually record into it, and then you can slow it down without changing the pitch, and you can take sections and loop them. So it's really good for transcribing, really good for, a lot of jazz players use it when they're learning, Charlie Parker's solos and stuff, trying to get that stuff down. You can slow it way down and it doesn't change pitch. And there's even a little patch in there that allows you to change the timbre so it doesn't get too weird. So it doesn't get too weird, too far away from the original timbre. AnyTune Pro Plus. And I think it's, for an app, it's expensive. It was like, I don't know what it is now, $11, I think, when I got it. There's AnyTune Pro, and that's free. And then there's AnyTune Pro Plus, which has a few more things in it that are really cool. Anybody else have any questions?
We've got time for probably like one more question or comment if anyone has one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Well, thank you guys. Thanks for listening. And definitely listen to the electronic music concert tomorrow. That's going to be really ridiculous. Thanks, Kira. Thanks, Charles. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks. Thanks a lot. All right. See you on the trail.
Yeah. See y'all, I guess, in a little bit with